So when does life officially end? I mean, it's a question we're still wrestling with today in hospitals, in courtrooms, everywhere. But what if I told you that 2,000 years ago, a group of ancient sages were debating this very same thing with incredible precision? That's what we're going to do. Dive into one single, totally fascinating ancient text to explore this timeless question. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The whole discussion kicks off with this paradox, a question that honestly seems to break your brain a little bit. Can something be legally dead, a corpse, while its body is still physically moving? And look, this is not some abstract thought experiment. The source text we're digging into, the Talmud, puts it this bluntly. It describes a situation where someone is considered a corpse, even though he is still twitching. That one phrase right there, that's the whole mystery we're gonna unravel. So here's the absolute key. The sages did something kind of radical. They drew a hard line between the body's lingering biological reflexes, the twitching, the convulsions, and a person's legal and ritual status. In their view, the body could absolutely still be moving, but the person, they were already gone. The biological state and the legal status were two completely different things. All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to really unpack that wild idea of a twitching corpse. Then, we'll look at the specific line they drew for human death. After that, we'll see how they tested that same idea on animals. Then, we're going to get into this super precise debate about what decapitation even means. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why any of this ancient stuff still matters a whole lot today. Okay, so how did they actually build this argument? Well, before they could get into all the details, the sages knew they needed a clear, observable standard for human death, a core principle that they could apply every single time. And this, right here, is just brilliant. They defined what they called halakhic death, or legal death, not by looking at the symptoms, like is the heart beating, is the person breathing? No, they focused on the cause. Their whole goal was to identify a catastrophic, non-survivable injury. It was all about finding that absolute point of no return. Now, what's wild is just how specific and honestly how graphic their criteria were. They gave two unmistakable examples. First, a broken neck, but, and this is key, only if the majority of the flesh around it was also cut. Second, if a body was torn open like a fish, specifically from the back. In either of those cases, even if that body was still twitching, the person was legally dead. But these thinkers didn't just make up rules and call it a day. They stress-tested them against their own core texts. So someone immediately brings up the story of Eli the high priest from the book of Samuel. He falls, breaks his neck, and dies on the spot. But wait, the story says nothing about the surrounding flesh being cut, so how does that fit the rule? And the answer, they realized, was right there in the details of the verse. The text goes out of its way to tell us that Eli was old and heavy, so the sages concluded his case was actually a special exception. Because of his age and his physical condition, for him, the broken neck by itself was a non-survivable injury. It just goes to show they were refining the rule, not just blindly applying it. Now, to make sure their logic was solid, the sages didn't just stop with people. They took this exact same framework and applied it to the animal kingdom. I mean, if this whole catastrophic injury principle was legit, it should work for other living things too, right? And they used this incredible analogy, something anyone could see for themselves in the natural world. I'm sure you've seen it. A lizard's tail gets cut off, and it just keeps wiggling and twitching on the ground. It's the perfect, vivid illustration of their core idea. Movement does not equal life. The tail is moving like crazy, but it is absolutely, definitively not alive. So then they set up these parallel standards for animals, all based on that exact same principle of irreversible damage. If an animal was cut in half, or if a hind leg was completely ripped off, or if it was beheaded, it was legally a carcass, period. It didn't matter if there were still some postmortem convulsions. Okay, this next part is where we really see the incredible intellectual rigor these guys had. They were not satisfied with just general rules. They pushed for absolute, razor-sharp precision. And that led them into a deep debate over the meaning of one of their own terms. It sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? What does beheaded mean? But for these legal scholars, getting this definition right was everything. Does it mean the head has to be completely off, physically separate, rolling on the floor? Or could it mean something a little more technical? The answer had real legal consequences. So two main viewpoints emerged. You had one scholar, Reish Lakish, who argued for the simple, literal meaning, actually removed, the
The head has to be 100% detached from the body, case closed. But then another scholar, Rabbi Asi, came in with a more technical definition, referencing a very specific temple ritual, like the bird offering.
Rabbi Asi's whole position hinged on this anatomical idea of the simanim. These are the two critical tubes in your throat that keep you alive: the trachea, which is your windpipe, and the esophagus, or gullet. His argument was that death happens the moment the majority of both of those structures are severed, even if the head is still technically attached by skin and bone. And in the end, it was Rabbi Asi's more nuanced anatomical definition that won the day. So for legal purposes, beheaded didn't mean the head was off. It meant that the two essential pathways for breathing and for eating were irreversibly destroyed. It's an unbelievably precise, almost surgical definition. So, okay, after all this ancient anatomy and deep legal debate, why does any of this matter to us right now? Well, let's connect all these threads from 2,000 years ago to our world today. So what can we actually learn from their whole approach? It really boils down to 4 key principles. 1, they focused on the cause of death, not the symptoms. 2, they zeroed in on finding a clear point of irreversible physical damage. 3, they created a standard that you could actually see and observe without any fancy tech. And 4, they applied that principle with incredible consistency.
And this is exactly why their debate feels so modern. We are still asking the exact same fundamental question. Is death defined by cardiac death, the moment the heart stops for good, or is it brain death, the moment the brain stops functioning, even if machines are keeping the body going? The search for that clear, definitive line is still on.
When you get right down to it, the tools have changed, but the mission hasn't. The Talmudic sages used the best science available to them, anatomy and direct observation, to try and draw a clear line. Today we use technology like EEGs and incredibly advanced life support, but we are all, them and us, on the same exact search for clarity, at that mysterious border between life and death. And that kind of leaves us with this one last big question to think about. We have technology that they couldn't have even imagined, machines that can breathe for a person, that can monitor every tiny flicker of brain activity. But with all of that incredible power, are we really any closer to a single, universally accepted answer for when life ends than these ancient scholars were 2,000 years ago?